After 50, pain rarely arrives as an accident. It arrives as information. Sciatic pain, in particular, is not the body betraying you, but the nervous system quietly asking for space, movement, and attention. We live in a culture that teaches us to fight pain or ignore it, yet the human body works on a different logic. It adapts, it compensates, and it communicates. When discomfort travels down the leg or settles deep in the lower back, it is not an ending. It is an invitation to understand how age, posture, muscle balance, and daily habits shape the way our nerves experience the world. After 50, sciatic pain rarely announces itself as an emergency. It arrives as a conversation already in progress. The nervous system does not speak in words, but in sensations, and discomfort along the path of the sciatic nerve is often its way of signaling that the internal environment has changed. With age, spinal discs gradually lose water content, becoming less resilient and more sensitive to compression. Muscles that once responded quickly to movement may now tighten in self-protection, and joints that were once forgiving begin to demand more careful alignment. None of this indicates failure. It reflects adaptation, a biological response to time, gravity, and repeated patterns of movement and stillness. The sciatic nerve itself is not easily injured, but it is deeply responsive to its surroundings. It passes through layers of muscle, connective tissue, and bone, relying on subtle shifts and healthy circulation to glide smoothly. When movement becomes limited, whether through long hours of sitting or fear of pain, the nerve loses that freedom. Science shows that nerves depend on gentle motion to maintain nourishment and signal clarity. Without it, irritation increases, not because the nerve is weak, but because its environment has become constrained. Pain, in this sense, is not the enemy. It is the messenger pointing toward restriction. Culturally, aging is often framed as decline, and pain is interpreted as proof that the body can no longer be trusted. This mindset creates tension not only in thought but in muscle. When pain is feared, the body tightens, and when it tightens, pressure increases. The nervous system becomes more vigilant, amplifying sensations that might otherwise remain quiet. Over time, this cycle reinforces itself. Understanding the science behind sciatic pain interrupts this loop. It allows the individual to see discomfort not as a threat, but as information arising from a complex, adaptive system. From a physiological perspective, many cases of sciatic pain over 50 are linked to reduced space and altered mechanics rather than structural damage. Small changes in posture, pelvic position, and muscle balance can significantly influence how forces travel through the spine and legs. The body, always seeking efficiency, adjusts to these changes, but not always comfortably. When signals of discomfort emerge, they are invitations to renegotiate how the body moves through daily life. This reframing shifts the response from resistance to curiosity. At this stage of life, exercise is often misunderstood as a tool to reclaim youth, but its deeper purpose is communication. Gentle, intentional movement sends messages back to the nervous system, telling it that motion is safe, that support exists, and that the environment can change. This dialogue between movement and sensation restores trust within the body. Pain begins to soften not because it is overpowered, but because it has been acknowledged, understood, and answered with respect for the biology that continues to adapt and respond across time. The idea that gentle movement can relieve sciatic pain challenges a deeply ingrained belief that change must be forceful to be effective. In reality, the nervous system responds best to subtlety, especially after 50, when tissues prioritize safety over speed. Hip-opening movements are powerful not because they stretch aggressively, but because they reintroduce variability into regions that have grown predictable and guarded. When the hips remain static for long periods, the surrounding muscles adapt by shortening and tightening, gradually reducing the space available for nerves and blood vessels. Gentle movement reverses this process by reminding the body that range and fluidity still exist. From a scientific perspective, nerves are living structures that rely on continuous circulation and motion to maintain health. They are designed to glide within their pathways, responding to changes in posture and movement. When hip mobility decreases, this glide is disrupted, creating subtle friction and sensitivity along the nerve's course. Research in neurodynamics shows that even slow, controlled movements can improve nerve mobility and reduce irritation. These movements act less like mechanical fixes and more like nourishment, restoring oxygen delivery and reducing inflammatory signals without overwhelming the system. There is also a neurological dimension that extends beyond muscles and joints. The brain constantly evaluates whether movement is safe. When pain has been present for weeks or months, the brain becomes cautious, interpreting certain motions as threats. Gentle hip opening exercises help retrain this perception. By moving within a comfortable range, the body gathers new data, showing the nervous system that motion does not automatically lead to harm. Over time, this recalibration reduces protective tension and allows movement to become smoother and more confident. Patience plays a critical role in this process. Unlike high-intensity exercise, gentle mobility work does not produce immediate, dramatic sensations. Its effects accumulate quietly, influencing tissue hydration, joint signaling, and muscle coordination over repeated practice. This gradual change mirrors the pace at which the body adapts with age. Science supports the idea that consistency alters tissue behavior more effectively than intensity, particularly in connective tissues that respond slowly to stress and release. On a human level, hip-opening movements invite a different relationship with the body. They encourage presence rather than performance. The act of sitting, breathing, and allowing the hips to open becomes a moment of awareness, where attention shifts from pain avoidance to sensation exploration. This shift has physiological consequences. Reduced stress lowers muscle tone and decreases nervous system arousal, creating conditions where healing is more likely to occur. In this way, gentle hip mobility is both a biological intervention and a psychological reassurance. It communicates safety, restores circulation, and re-establishes motion where stillness once dominated. Relief emerges not through force or urgency, but through a steady return to movement that respects the body's need for time, space, and trust. Spinal stability is often misunderstood as stiffness, yet the science of movement tells a very different story. True support of the spine comes from deep, coordinated muscles that work quietly in the background, adjusting moment by moment as the body moves. After 50, these muscles can become less responsive, not because they are damaged, but because modern life rarely asks them to participate. Prolonged sitting, reduced physical variety, and fear of pain gradually shift the workload to superficial muscles, leaving the deeper stabilizers underactive. This imbalance changes how force travels through the spine and increases the likelihood of nerve irritation. The deep core muscles, including those that connect the abdomen, pelvis, and lower back, act like an internal guidance system. When they engage gently, they reduce unnecessary strain on spinal joints and discs. Research consistently shows that even small, controlled movements can improve neuromuscular coordination in this region. Pelvic tilts and similar exercises work not by strengthening in the traditional sense, but by restoring timing and communication between muscles and the nervous system. This subtle activation tells the spine that it is supported from within. From a neurological perspective, stability has a profound effect on pain perception. When the nervous system senses instability, it increases muscle tension as a protective strategy. This response is automatic and often unconscious. Over time, sustained tension compresses surrounding tissues and sensitizes nerves, including the sciatic nerve. Gentle core activation reduces this protective guarding by improving the brain's confidence in the body's ability to manage movement. As confidence increases, unnecessary tension begins to release. There is also a metabolic dimension to spinal support. Deep stabilizing muscles are rich in endurance-oriented fibers designed for sustained, low-level activity. These muscles respond best to slow, repetitive engagement rather than intense effort. When activated regularly, they improve local circulation and oxygen delivery to spinal tissues. This environment supports tissue repair and reduces the buildup of inflammatory byproducts that can contribute to pain. The process is quiet and gradual, but biologically meaningful. Beyond the mechanics, spinal stability carries a symbolic weight. As people age, uncertainty about physical capability often grows. Pain reinforces the belief that the body is fragile and unpredictable. Relearning how to activate deep support muscles gently counters this belief. Each controlled movement becomes evidence that the body can still organize itself intelligently. This shift in perception has measurable effects on stress hormones and muscle tone, further supporting pain relief. Stability, in this sense, is not about holding the body rigid but about allowing movement to occur within a framework of support. When the spine feels guided rather than braced, pressure on the nervous system decreases. Pain softens not because it is forced away, but because the underlying conditions that sustained it begin to change. Through consistent, mindful activation, the body relearns balance, and the spine reclaims its role as a dynamic structure capable of both strength and adaptability. Flexibility is often thought of as an aesthetic or performance quality, but after 50, it becomes a fundamental element of comfort, balance, and nerve health. The hamstrings, long muscles that run along the back of the thighs, have an outsized influence on the lower back and pelvis. When they tighten, they create subtle but persistent pulls on the pelvic bones, shifting alignment in ways that increase stress on the spinal joints and the pathways through which nerves travel. This tension does not announce itself immediately as pain. Rather, it accumulates quietly over months or years, contributing to stiffness, postural imbalance, and irritation of the sciatic nerve. Gentle, intentional stretches help release this tension, restoring freedom of motion while simultaneously influencing the structures connected to them. From a physiological standpoint, the hamstrings are composed of both fast and slow-twitch fibers, with a high density of connective tissue that responds more slowly to stress than the muscle fibers themselves. Abrupt or forceful stretching risks overstimulation and reflexive tightening, whereas gradual, mindful elongation encourages the tissue to adapt safely. As the hamstrings lengthen, they relieve posterior tension, allowing the pelvis to assume a more neutral position. This alignment reduces compression along the sciatic nerve and improves the distribution of forces through the spine and hips. Over time, this simple adjustment can decrease pain signals, improve mobility, and enhance the body's capacity to move freely. Beyond the mechanical benefits, flexibility work serves as a form of communication with the nervous system. Nerves respond not only to chemical signals but to physical cues of motion and stability. When hamstrings are stiff, the nervous system interprets this as a constraint on movement, leading to increased protective tension in surrounding muscles and joints. Slowly stretching the hamstrings conveys a different message. Movement is safe, and the body can explore its range without risk. This feedback loop reduces unnecessary guarding, creating conditions in which the sciatic nerve can glide freely and comfortably. Flexibility also supports circulation and hydration in connective tissues. Muscles and fascia are living systems that rely on movement to exchange nutrients and clear metabolic byproducts. Gentle hamstring stretches increase blood flow to the surrounding area, nourishing both muscle fibers and connective tissue. Improved circulation helps reduce inflammation and facilitates recovery from minor strains or overuse. In this way, stretching is both preventive and restorative, promoting long-term resilience rather than temporary relief. On a more experimental level, stretching fosters awareness and presence. The act of bending toward the foot, holding a gentle tension, and feeling the body respond is an exercise in mindfulness as much as physiology. It reminds the practitioner that flexibility is not simply about achieving a certain position, but about re-establishing harmony between intention, sensation, and movement. For someone over 50, this process can feel profoundly empowering, demonstrating that the body remains capable of adaptation and growth. Each stretch becomes a small dialogue, a recognition that the nervous system, muscles, and connective tissue are interconnected, responsive, and alive, and that with careful, consistent attention, pain can be reduced and movement restored. The 4 exercises designed to relieve sciatic pain are not simply a checklist of movements, they are invitations to engage deeply with the body's intelligence. After 50, the body does not respond to force alone but to mindful interaction, to signals that communicate safety, awareness, and respect. Each gentle stretch, tilt, or controlled motion sends a message to the nervous system that the environment is no longer threatening, that movement is permitted, and that the structures surrounding the sciatic nerve can relax and adapt. This principle is rooted in science. Tissues are living, responsive systems that change gradually in response to consistent, thoughtful stimulation rather than sudden extremes or intensity. The nervous system, in particular, thrives on predictability coupled with subtle novelty. When the body repeatedly experiences safe, gentle movement, the brain recalibrates its understanding of threat and comfort. Over time, protective tension diminishes, circulation improves, and the glide of nerves along their anatomical pathways becomes smoother. This is not a theoretical idea. It is observable in the patterns of pain reduction reported in people who engage in mindful mobility practices over weeks and months. Relief emerges not from ignoring discomfort, but from addressing the underlying factors that amplify it: stiffness, muscular imbalance, and diminished neural flexibility. There is also a broader biological rhythm at work. After 50, tissues respond more slowly to stress and recover more gradually, making consistency far more impactful than intensity. Gentle exercises repeated regularly create microenvironments of healing, where muscles, fascia, and connective tissue experience incremental elongation, increased circulation, and improved coordination. The cumulative effect is profound. The body relearns how to organize itself efficiently, reducing unnecessary strain on the sciatic nerve and promoting smoother movement in everyday activities. The process is gradual, almost imperceptible at first, but steady practice reinforces the principle that small, deliberate actions produce significant, lasting benefits. Beyond physiology, these exercises nurture a philosophical understanding of the body's capacity for self-regulation. Pain is not simply an adversary to be defeated. It is a guide, offering insight into areas of restriction, imbalance, or neglect. When approached with curiosity and respect, movement transforms from a mechanical intervention into a conversation with the body. Each exercise becomes an experiment in awareness, noticing how a stretch feels, observing subtle changes in posture, and recognizing the body's responses without judgment. This reflective practice fosters patience and compassion, reinforcing the idea that health after 50 is not about reclaiming a youthful body, but about cultivating resilience, adaptability, and well-being within the body that exists now. Finally, these movements illustrate a fundamental truth about human physiology. Healing is rarely abrupt, and comfort is rarely instantaneous. Relief from sciatic discomfort comes from patterns, rhythm, and repetition that honor the body's intelligence and its capacity to learn. The 4 exercises, when practiced mindfully, create conditions in which pain diminishes, motion improves, and confidence in the body grows. They are an invitation to engage with the nervous system, muscles, and connective tissue not as obstacles or failures, but as responsive partners in the ongoing process of adaptation, strength, and restoration.